Hello everyone, thanks for joining this presentation. I'm sure you know the topic, it's wrote it here. Feedforward algorithm, it's one of the most interesting topic in interdisciplinary area between neuroscience and AI, I think, in my perspective. So today we want to talk about that. I'm Mosab Rezaei, under supervision of Professor Friedman. So let's see what we have here. Okay, I'm sure most of you saw this image in a lot of presentation that you did or your student presented to you. And when they want to talk about the algorithm, they want to talk about the, I don't know, neural network, deep neural network, and so on, and how we inspired by these biological neurons. But there is something weird here, and no one is not correct, but I exaggerated, but no one care about that. We see that, and we said, okay, we have a soma here, which is the core of the neuron. We have some dendrite, they will be activated after a threshold, and neuron send a signal to the axon and terminals, pass those signals to the other neurons. So we have a structure, and we try to implement it in our model. But how this structure has been implemented? How this neuron knows should be here instead of to be here? How this neuron knows how many connections should we have here? So it's really one of the biggest mysteries in, until now in neuroscience, that how our brain knows to train the models, train the neurals and their connections. For example, look at here. We can, it's not in the brain, it's in a dish. You can see the axons, how axons moving around each other and finally meet each other and handshaking and create a connection between themselves. It's a connection between two, please, come. It's a connection between two neurons. So it's really mysterious, you know. If you ask a neuroscientist how it's happened, how these neurons find each other, they told you it's a neuroplasticity. It's clear for us that neurons can do that. And if you ask again how the neurons can do such a thing, they give you some detail about the neuron, which I think they are correct, but it's not your answer. For example, in previous slide, you saw that the axons and the terminal at the end of the axons, okay? We call it as a growth cones. At the end of the axons, you can see the detail here. And if I want to say, give you an example, imagine you're a dog walker, okay? When you are a dog walker, you have a lot of dog and try to find something around the ground and sniffing, okay? You do that, something like that, and you follow the dogs. It's exactly what's happened for the axons, okay? Based on this paper that have been published in Nature, they said, it seems it's really like a street, and there's some chemical environment around the axons that force the neurons to go to the left, go to the right, or find their path, okay? But it's not your answer. Because if you ask them, okay, it's another video of the growth cones, and if you ask them, okay, we understand there are some chemical environment around these axons that force the axons to deterministically find the path. But how this environment force this model? Who control this environment to force the axons do this that as I saw, okay? It's the main question that I think need to be answered. But another interesting thing that really I like it is that your brain is the center of your body, okay? Your brain control your body, but your brain doesn't have any center. You can't find any controller in your brain. So how brain can control their changes during the learning? You can see here a visual path in the brain. You see something, all the neurons go through your brain to the primary visual cortex, and after extracting all feature of the image, we said the extracting all feature of the image because we saw that in the laboratory, and we created a deep neural network based on that. By the way, after extracting all feature here, we pass the information through different part of the brain, and we can recognize what is in the image. that has been saw by the sensors, which we call it eyes. Okay. Here in cortex, you can see a small part of the cortex of the mice, and you can see the different columns, which is similar to our brain, and you can see different layer, which is similar to the deep neural network model that we implemented. And finally, here, you say, okay, I can see an apple. Okay? When you see an apple, if it's wrong, how you want to backpropagate the error to change all these neurons here? It's almost impossible, okay? Let me show you something. Okay, before that, let's say something. We saw how much brain is complicated, and it's really hard to find the detail to backpropagate the error to the model. But also, imagine we have such a thing, okay? Imagine we have a final value, and we can backpropagate the error. Okay, it's fine. In imaginary world, it's possible. You have an error, and you want to backpropagate the error. But look at here. The brain in your brain are not static. They are dynamically changes. Look at these stupid neurons, okay, that change their place in really, I don't know, in maybe 1 or 2 seconds. So imagine these neurons was responsible for an error, okay? And you want to backpropagate the error. When you backpropagate the error to the neurons, the model is totally changed, because any activity that your brain do in forward process, seeing something, change your brain. When you see something, your brain is changing at the same time. So if you have a backpropagation error mechanism, you want to fix the thing that doesn't exist there. So it's another problem with the backpropagation in our brain. I really like this. Okay, there is another paper that published in 2020 in Nature. They try to find backpropagation in the brain, because after publishing the backpropagation by Hinton in beginning of the second golden age of AI, many neuroscientists think that they find the answer. We can say something about the brain and solve this problem. All of you know about the backpropagation. We have an input. It's from that paper. We have an input. Input generate an output. When you have an output, you calculate the error. And then in the second phase, you backpropagate the error and calculate the gradient for each neurons. And in this third phase, you update the weights. And in the fourth phase, you do that again. So another problem with the backpropagation is that you need to shut down your brain during the training. You need to forward pass the data, for example, a batch of the data, and you need to shut down your brain because you want to update the weights, okay, in backpropagation phase. So we doesn't have such a thing in our brain. But they said, okay, we can see something in brain that says us maybe we have backpropagation. I disagree with them. I think Hinton, which is one of the authors, if in this paper at that time was agree with them, but now he changed the idea. I will share it with you later. What they found, they said we have a backward pass in our brain. Sometimes when a neuron generates active a neighbor's neurons and you have a forward pass, in some local area in your brain, you have a backward pass, and it's exactly similar to what happened in the forward pass. And this backward pass can change your models, and there are other neurons that can normalize the activity between this forward pass and backward pass. And you can see here how backward pass is possible. And maybe it will be interesting if you know that the neuron can change their activity by themselves. For example, if you have a neuron like this, and it's an axon, if a neuron shut a signal, and signal is really high, okay, since the signal is really high, some of the signal, instead of going to through the axons, because the power of the signal, some of them get back through the dendrites. When the signal is here, the neuron activated by itself and again generate another signals. And it can be happen several times. And when the neighbor sees neurons that generate a signal constantly, they stop to being connected with these neurons. Okay, so what this means? It means the neuron is really dynamic. We can count on them to calculate an error at the end of the brain and backpropagate the error to train the model. So, you may see a lot of this paper that we have some backpropagation type in the brain, but I disagree with them, but they said, okay, it's similar to the backpropagation, but it's really similar to the perceptron. You know, perceptron is one of the first neurons that we created at the beginning of the AI age, and we can say a neuron is the smallest unit in artificial intelligence research area, okay, to solve a problem. In perceptron, we understand it's possible to calculate the error and backpropagate the gradient and update the weights. But we didn't call it as a backpropagation. We just call it as a backward. We call it as a perceptron. I think what they found in the brain is something like a perceptron, or at the most possibility, it's a local backpropagation. So we can say the brain has a backpropagation. This paper, if you were familiar with this area, is one of the hottest topics nowadays, and maybe you saw that in the news. It's published in 2024. They think it's impossible we have a backpropagation in the brain. Let me give you this example, and another reason why we don't have a backpropagation in the brain. It's a traceography, I think, about the brain. Who knows what is this animal? You know that? Platypus. Platypus? Interesting. We call it, I forgot my name, by the way. Platypus. We call it platypus. I don't know. It's a local name, yeah?
That's what I said, platypus.
Oh, platypus. Okay. Yeah, we call it platypus. Sorry, I didn't understand. Okay, it's a platypus. Maybe it's the first time you saw this animal, okay? By first time to seeing this animal, your brain constantly and permanently knows the name of this animal, okay? It doesn't happen in the AI and artificial neural networks. Because when you want to learn something to your model, you need to have a lot of data, a lot of examples. But our brain doesn't work like that. So I think if you find an algorithm that follow the way our brain train, we can solve a lot of problem in our AI area, like depending a lot of data or massive data and spending a lot of time to train it. If I want to be honest, there are some critique on this area because here, yes, you for the first time see this animal, but your eyes has a quality about more than 500 megapixels, and you can see this animal with 60 frames per second. In some way, we can say you are giving a massive data at the same time. You know, maybe your brain is using the massive data. I don't know how we can say, but the only thing I'm sure we can say is that your brain learned something constantly, not a zero-shot learning that we have or one-shot learning that we have in AIs. Okay, what they said, and let me see that. Okay, what they said and how their model works. It's a bear, and unfortunately it's deaf because of the fight or something, we don't know. Bears see the salmons. So here we saw the salmons. Bear expect to hear the voice of the water and the smell of the salmons. But since the bear is deaf, the expectation is wrong. Bear need to regularization or expectation, need to change the expectation. So the brain of the bear need to be updated. What's happening in backpropagation is that we have an error here, which is because of the wrong expectation. We need to backpropagate error through the models like this, as you can see as happen, and update the model in a way that we didn't have activation here, we doesn't have activation here, which means now we don't have any expectation when we saw the salmons. But the problem is that when we do the backpropagation, since all of the neurons have some overlap with each other, you have a fully connected layer at the end of the model, yes? Your fully connected layer means each of your classes share the weights through the models. So when you fix one of them, you change the others. Maybe the others work correctly and 100% correct. So they said we can't do the backpropagation in our brain because it means we destroy and decrease those accurate numbers. So they introduced another model, and unfortunately our brain is confused. You need to go through the paper to fully understand what they said, but I try to share what their idea. They said in simple way, they define a momentum and try to change the weights locally. I mean, they try to backpropagate error in the small portion of the model, not through whole of the model, okay? So when you do that locally and defining a term of the momentum, you didn't change any correct weights. So the expectation for the future will be correct. How they did it, it's when you saw the salmon, you smell salmon. Unfortunately, it's the value that we expected, which is not hearing anything, because the expectation should be, since we are deaf, the bear is deaf, the expectation is zero output from here, but the output is here, and this one is the error. They define this momentum here that force the models, whole of the models come down a little bit. If we did backpropagation, whole the model will be here. But since they defined the momentum term in some way, it's not exactly momentum spins, but they make it more understandable. The model come back again to the previous position, and you can see only this section comes a little bit down. So you change a local area instead of the whole of the model based on the error at the output. Their result show that, I think it's clear, by training epoch, they get the better accuracy in comparison to the backpropagation with the less number of the epoch, and with the lowest number of the learning rate, they got the less error at the end with similar number of the layers. Okay, but now let's talk about the forward. Before going through the paper, there are several terms that you need to know about the forward. First one is the negative data. And I need to draw something for you. Okay, imagine here is a distribution of the cats in our data set. And here is a distribution of the dog in our data set. Okay? If you want to generate something, it means if you want to generate a cat, or if you want to generate a dog, for example, is dog, here is cat. Okay? You need to pick up a sample from here if you want to generate a dog. Or if you want to generate a cat, you need to pick up something here. How you do that? By forcing the model to understand the distribution of your sample. Okay? If you just draw a line in this space and said, okay, select a point on the other side, it's possible your model selects something here. What it will be? It can be a lion instead of the cat. They are more closer to the cat, but far away from the dog, and also far away from your distribution, expected distribution. And something like here, it can be a wolf. Okay? We didn't do such a thing. So we try to force the model better understand the distribution of the samples by nonlinear functions. Still, it's not accurate. You need to have something like that because it should be something here which we didn't want it. How we can do that? Imagine you have a one distribution. It will be easy to explain it. Okay, you have one distribution, and you want to find this distribution, which if I draw it in a 3D area, the density will be something like that, okay? I hope you understand what I want to say, okay? So if you want to do that, you need to have negative data to force your model to draw the line somewhere here instead of the something here. You need to negative data to force your model to understand your distribution. It's what Hinton tried to say by negative data. So Hinton used the MNIST data set, which all of you know about the MNIST data set. I don't want to explain it to you. The MNIST data set, we have a number 7 and we have a number 6. They use a mask. This mask cover a portion of this image, and this mask cover a portion of the image, and they combine them to each other to create a negative data. Why they use, you can do something in your paper. Why we do something like that? Because we need to generate those negative data that be close as much as possible in your distribution. You can generate a random noise, but it will be here. Or you can use the other data set, but it will be here, and it's not useful for you. You need those negative data is really close to the border of your distribution. It's the way why they use this technique to generate negative data. Create the garbage, I mean. Okay. I'm sure you at least be in the Professor Al-Houri class. Yeah, Ibrahim, you see these slides. I borrowed these slides from the LoRa presentation. Yeah, but so please, you didn't answer this question. My question is that it's a border, okay? All of you know we're working with the border in AI area, okay? And what this border showed to you? What do you understand about this border? What information you can understand or get when you look at the border? I want to give you a clue to answer this question. We have only 3 cells in our vector, 5, 3, and 2. Now, what this vector shows to you? Okay, I try to say another thing. It's 3-dimensional representation of the point, 5, 3, and 2. Okay. This border shows a direction and magnitude. Any border shows a direction and magnitude of your data. Where's the exactly, for example, if the cat is here, we know the direction and magnitude. It's the most important thing that we know about the border. In LoRa, they use it to train the fine-tuned model, which I will be happy to explain it in the future. It's a really interesting paper. But here, Hinton says, okay, let's only pass the direction information through the next layers instead of the whole of the vector. I mean, I will explain it in the next slide to you. We calculate them with really easy calculations, but let me explain it here. Just remember what I said here, okay? It's the whole idea behind the forward. And I finally tell you how much is close to our brain. Here, in forward, we have 2 forward. One for positive data and one for negative data, okay? Here is a forward, the positive data, and here is a forward of the negative data. The first thing, we never come back to the model, okay? It's the first thing. The second thing is that we train the model layer by layer, exactly like what happened in our brain. When your brain get any signal from your neuron in your brain, get any signal from the previous layer, they changed and passed the signal. And we don't care about them, okay? The thing that we want to do is increasing the positive activation function. What is that? If you see, we add a label of this image to the image. We have a label for this one, which is immersed to the image, which is number 6. This one is nothing with the wrong label. And it can be number 6 exactly like that with the wrong label, negative data. Okay? So what we want? We want to pass this data through the layer, and we expect to have what? The sum of the maximum number of sum of the all output in activation functions. We expect when we add these values, generated values to each other, they be more than a defined and constant threshold. What that means? We want to, by passing the positive sample through each layer, we see the highest activity between the neurons. So we force the model to do something, to generate a bigger number. But generating the bigger number will be easy to detect by these neurons that it's positive sample, so they easily can be misunderstood with what we want. So Hinton says, by use the magnitude here to understand the neurons, but just only pass the orientation of the model. Here, instead of the passing whole the model, we pass the one by one value. I draw it wrong, sorry. It's the orientation and it's the magnitude. We use for training each layer by magnitude, but we pass only the direction of the board. In another forward pass, when we pass the negative data, we expect the lowest activity in each neurons. And it's exactly what I said. The loss function for each neurons. The loss function should be 0, so these two sides should be 0. There is a plus between them. Each side should be 0 when the logarithm is 1. It means this equation should be 0 and this one should be 0. When this one should be 0 and will be 0, what is it? It's the output of positive data. When you increase this value, it means you have a small value here. And the small value close to the 0. So the log will be close to the 0, to the 1, and the output will be 0. And for negative data, we want a small negative activity, less than the threshold. It will be negative, so it will be again close to the 0. So it's the idea behind what Hinton wants to say.
What is this neural network?
It's a simple fully connected neural network. But Hinton applied in recurrent neural network and applying on the other stuffs.
What is the input? Is the input the image or the image with the label?
It's the image that, let me draw it. If I correctly remember, the image in Ernest dataset is 16 by 16 pixel. Okay? When you want to pass it through the fully connected layer, we create a one-dimensional vector, which will be fully connected close to the model. In old model, we only pass the image. But now we have some detail about the label in the image here. So this information about the label will be at the beginning of the vector.
So you have one 2D image and another vector as input to the neural network?
We transfer the 2D image to the one-dimensional vector. Then, so when we have a one-dimensional vector, the first cells represent the labels, and the rest represent the detail about the image. Then we pass them through the input layers.
So let's say you have four pixels for representing the label, then you have another 16 times.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
So you are basically passing both the labels and the image to the neural network.
Exactly. Okay, let's see some detail about the models. Hinton shows that in the first layer of this convolutional neural network, all the receptive fields, can understand some pattern behind the MNIST data set. And it's representing, I'm sure you remember when we visualized the feature map of the convolutional neural network, it's exactly something like what happened in backpropagation. And I think it's really amazing. Okay.
Oh, another question. So
sure.
For the MNIST data, you know it's a 10-class classification task, right? And when you show the loss function, there are positive samples and negative samples. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
But how you differentiate the 10 classes? I mean, for the 10 classes, they can all be positive, right?
Yeah.
So how you can differentiate them?
The way the model differentiated is based on the label is here. Finally, imagine that we have 10 value here, 1 to 9 and 0. When we evaluate the models based on what we have here, since the next, this one will be more clear that explain your answer, but since it's a positive samples and negative samples contain true value, real value with wrong activation functions, the final layer shut down those output which was not related to the 6. For example, in the negative value, we have number 6, which is totally correct, but with the wrong number. So the models should shut down the other ones which was not participate to generating the output for the correct value. Let me show you the last one, this one. Especially for labels data, Hinton says suggests another approaches to cover some of the errors. In the recurrent neural network approach, he said, imagine we have a frame of the movie, okay? I'm sure you saw those pedestrian detector movie. Sometimes they said you are here, sometimes it will be disappear, and again said you are here when you are moving, okay? With the green rectangle. What's the problem is that maybe some posture that you get can be detected by the model, okay? So what's happened, Hinton says, when we pass data through this feedforward algorithm, we need to use the next and previous generated values for each samples, which can happen in our brain, and I showed you before. We can use the backpropagation locally. When we do that, for example, we pass this number here, and it's come here, and it's come here, okay? When we pass this information, if the label for this one detected correctly, and the label for this one detected incorrectly, what that mean? That mean this information, imagine this section by yourself, you have something here about the correct label and about the previous frame, and you pass this information until to the first layers. So first, one of the first input here, if you detect it incorrectly, but now you have some pre-information about the previous frame because of these hierarchical backpropagation. So your model can understand what exactly this image is, okay? I can't say I totally understand what they implemented in this movie framework, but I think they try to show that in really short paper, our model work in many different areas. And if you read the paper, you can see Hinton says a lot of things in really short paper. I'm not sure you know about that. Go ahead.
Is this something related with autoregressive model?
They didn't implement it autoregressive in this one, but the extension version, they had it.
The idea is this something similar?
Yeah, I understand what you said. We have some information about the previous data to generate the new one. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Maybe something like this was in the brain of Hinton. I don't know. But the most important thing is that they try to show that in different approaches, our models work. Okay? And Hinton is really weird guy. Hinton is one of the famous scientists that doesn't know coding in the Python. You know, Hinton doesn't know anything about the Python at all. He just think and code his idea in MATLAB and give it to the student and say, go, okay, do the Python stuff on it and let me know it's work or not. And drop out and everything. For example, Andrew Karpathy in one of the videos, I'm not sure you saw that, but it's really interesting. Andrew Karpathy said, I was in a class after Hinton. He said, I have an idea about turning off some of the neurons. Can you do that at the class for me, please? And one of the students do the dropout in the class with the Python, which Hinton can do that. And they saw the improvement in accuracy. And they publish it after during the class. Yeah, it's another thing that I think was interesting about the Python. Okay, here. I'm sure you didn't expect that the forward shows better accuracy than the backpropagation, but the interesting thing is that in different tags, for example, rotation, the result is close to the backpropagation with many different data sets. Or in detecting the flipped images, or I don't know, rotated images. For example, in flipped images, you can see close accuracy. You can see how much in this task their accuracy is close in different data sets. It's not done by Hinton. It's another paper which did this one after publishing this paper. And there are a lot of other work that people try to show the accuracy of the forward. Is another paper that you can see the forward accuracy and forward F1 in comparing to the backpropagation in different number of the layer or node, I think, in MNIST and CFAR 10 and CFAR 100. Forward is not much accurate like a backpropagation, but I think it's not garbage. You know, you can see how much is close to the backpropagation. And please consider that backpropagation is well established. And it's I don't know, 50 years we are working on it. But like forward published and released in 2022. But one of the last slide, one of the interesting idea is not that for me. We talk about the negative data, okay? We talk how much we need to negative data to train the model. But how our brain generates the negative data? It's what the Hinton mentioned. And I think it's really interesting. Is there any idea how our brain generates the negative data? I give you an example, then answer me, okay? When you are a child, you catch something and trying to throw them away, okay? Your brain understands the physics, how much power I need to do something, okay? Or how much power I need to break a stone. You are using the real data, your brain trying to using the real data to understand the physics. And your brain understands the physics for future. For example, you see the Cristiano Ronaldo do the hard curve to hit the goals. How they do that? By understanding the physics without understanding the physics, by experiment, okay? The brain understands the physics. So, but we need the negative data based on what the Hinton mentions. Do you have any idea how we can generate those negative data?
By making wrong predictions.
It's one of them, exactly. Like, for example, when your mom told you it's not an apple, and your brain understands it's a negative data, okay? But another interesting idea that Hinton mentioned is that our brain uses the negative data by dreaming. He said when you're sleeping, you see something, your brain generates some fake information. And this fake information trained as a negative data in your brain. It's a really big assumption. I don't want to say it's totally correct or I'm agree with that, but it's interesting. You know, he said during the dreaming you have a lot of incorrect or unrelated image with the reality, so your brain can understand the reality doesn't work like that. So maybe, and there are a lot of papers recently, especially, that shows we are learning during sleeps, and fMRI shows we are in the learning process. We still didn't know how much our brain is matched with this algorithm, but I think it's really interesting idea. So as a final conclusion, the forward, similar to the brain in some ways. One is does not depend to the back-propagating errors, first. Second, is not depending the being, we don't need to store, oh, I didn't mention something. I think it's really important. Let me show you something. You have a fully connected neural network here, okay? When you pass a data, like an MNIST, through these models, each model generates an output, okay? You have to store all of them. Why? Because when finally you calculate the error, to calculate the gradient for each of these weights, you need to find out what was the amount of the output and calculate the error based on the input to the models and so on. But in forward, and your brain doesn't do that, you know? It doesn't save the error for each neurons. In forward, after generating the output, immediately we update the neurons and we don't care about the information here. So in this way, we store more information. We use the less amount of the storage if we can implement this approach in our brain to our AI models. So in this way is again similar to our brain. And there are some other techniques that I think persuade us if forward is not what happened in our brain, we can conclude absolutely backpropagation is not what happened in our brain. And finally, thank you for your attention. If you have any question or sharing ideas, thinking loudly, yeah, sure.